Today, I wanted to get into one of the main components of a yoga practice that will transform your life. And it is not the yoga practice that many people know. So there's two different kinds of yoga practices. There's one that's very feelings-based and one that's very archetypal. And the feelings-based yoga practices is usually like your flow class. It's not a class that focuses on true alignment. And so the thing is when we do yoga from our feelings, right, our feelings only know what they know. And so our feelings are predicated upon the experiences that we've had, how we've reacted to those experiences, and the muscle memory that has been held within our bodies through those experiences. And so when we're in a feelings-based practice, we're only doing what feels right because it's all we know, and we actually don't have a different view of how things could be different. And so it doesn't have the same effect on shifting the mind, on shifting the reality. Now, when we come into a practice like Katonah yoga and using archetypal principles of proportion, of alignment within the body, that is true. It's true to you because you're measuring yourself through your own proportions, and you're also using a grid in your practice so that you are always aligning yourself to the geometry that is inherent in all things, right? The universe is incredibly mathematical. And so when we're doing this practice, it's different than feelings because what ends up happening is that we get to measure our feelings with how the pose actually is. And then we get to decide which pose we want to do. And so when you do the yoga practice in such a way that is measured, right, you are no longer being personal. You're taking yourself out of the personal circumstances, which is where the beliefs are held, all of the conditioning is held, where everything is held in the muscles and in the mind, and you're moving yourself into perfect symmetry. And what this does is the current in the body moves differently, right? The muscles begin to shift because you're working on the structure in the bones. And when this starts to happen, this is where the mind starts to shift, and then everything that you see will change. And so why we're always looking for universal archetypal alignment is because when we are there, everything in our life becomes more aligned, right? The moment we're not aligned in our body, we're not aligned in our life. And then when we're not aligned in life, life feels very hard. It feels very sticky. It always feels like we're climbing up a hill, a mountain, right? And so the whole point of this practice is to understand the ease. And so I wanted to bring through something today that's going to help with every single pose that you do. So every single pose can be placed on a grid, right? And so the grid that we work with is literally the grid of the compass, right? These are all 45-degree angles. And so you have a whole sphere because the whole point of the practice is to use the angles to eventually become spherical, round, whole, integrated, all of that. And so the grid that you use, though you're thinking of it like 2D, you want to imagine this as 3D, so that when you're in a posture, say we come into butterfly pose, right? And you put yourself right in the center of the grid. And then on the lines is where you're going to draw all the geometry of the postures, right? And so I have the line is going out with my left knee. This line is going out with my right knee. My feet are on, you can call it the north line, right? You have north, you have west, you have east, you have northeast, northwest, right? And then my butt are also on the diagonal cuts. So you have your knee diagonal cutting its opposite butt, the right knee diagonal cutting its opposite butt. Your sacrum is the diagonal cut or the polarity of your pubis, and you're lined up. And so rather than taking your butterfly too tight, right? You actually learn where you're supposed to be in time and space, because the moment it's too tight, everything gets a little bit too open, and what is too open will fall apart. And so yoga is not stretching, right? Yoga is finding the perfect form in which you can create a good container. And the container is holding all of you. It's holding your feelings, it's holding your experiences, it's holding, right, the relationships with you and everything around you. And so when you can begin to bring your poses into the geometry and the symmetry of the archetypal lines, you'll begin to see a lot of shifts in your body, because it's not where you need to go. Otherwise, you would be doing it already. And so every single pose can be measured along the grid, right? You can have your bound angle here that eventually that your head will fit right into the arches of your feet, right? When you're setting yourself up in a standing pose, right? When you want to do the perfect alignment of your feet, hip distance, you turn one foot and touch the inner heel and turn it out. You're going to have your feet lined up on the grid, right? And so the heels are lined up on the lines, the toes are lined up on the other diagonal cut lines, so that if you have bigger feet, it's going to be wider, but they're still going to be touching the lines, right? And then you can get your knees in your armpits, right? You can let your head go down. You can fold yourself over. And so pigeon pose, right, is done on the grid. And so the knee is hitting diagonal cuts. So many people do pigeon pose too close, right? Where their knee is too close to their body. And so they start to feel it in the knee. And so when you get the knee all the way to the 45-degree angle diagonal cut of the right arm, which is the west side of the body, so this is the northwest line, and then your foot is going to be on the northeast line, right? And so anywhere you put the foot, whether you're holding it closer, whether it's further, it's always going to end up on that line. And your back foot is pointed straight back. And then so you can see how pigeon will eventually lead you into lotus, right? When you're sitting right in the middle of the grid and you have your foot, which is the pigeon foot pointing up towards the sky. Never flex your foot in pigeon. And then the other foot, so you have two pigeon feet in lotus, both on the lines. And then you can start to see that like the postures are not arbitrary, right? People can do lotuses like this and the knees in the air, and it's just a messy posture that's going to eventually hurt the knee. But when you can begin to really do a pigeon well, and you open up your body enough so that that one foot eventually gets into a lotus, then you can start to use it. You can start to maybe eventually work towards the full lotus. You can work towards taking twists here, right? But you're always putting yourself on a grid so that even if my sternum's forward and I grab my foot and I take my hand behind my back, right? My shoulders are eventually going to line up with the two lines here, and my nose is going to point back south where it's north now. It's going to go 180 degrees to look south, which is eventually the full revolution, the full spherical revolution of being in a twist, right? It is when your hips are at 3 and 9, when your heart turns 90, and when your vision turns 180. And so when you start to relay your whole body on this grid, that is at first two-dimensional, but is eventually like multi-dimensional through you, you are moving your body in this geometrical way so that you can not squish the organs and the glands, right? So that you can keep the arches in your body so you're not sitting back on your tail, so that you start to see where your body is actually supposed to be positioned in time and space in the postures based on the symmetry that you were born with, so that you can eventually work towards something in your practice, right? And that's all this is you're using a map to position yourself, to see where you are in time and space. And no one's going to start in the perfect position because we haven't been doing it our whole lives. And so when you learn that, you start to begin to see that, okay, if my leg is here, it's my feelings. It might not be right. I can put it over here, and then I can see how that feels. And I can work towards getting my foot further forward, say as in pigeon, right? And so even when we're doing our wide-legged splits, right? The knees are bent, the feet are on the line, we come forward, and it's all so measured, right? You can twist here, and I'm still working in a grid because the grid is dimensional. And so I really encourage you to, if you don't have straps, to in your mind start to create these lines in your practice and start to know the math and the geometry so that when you come into the poses, you're oriented. And so all of it is to really orient yourself in time and space, to read the map, to know where you are in this moment, to know if it's where you want to be, if there's things coming up in the body, if maybe you need to head in a different direction. So using the grid is a really great way to do that. It's a good concept to use in your yoga practice, is incredible alongside my yoga book, Yoga as Origami, so that you can properly position yourself in the poses without your feelings, because it's very hard to do it when you're doing your own personal practice. If you don't have a teacher looking at you, if you don't have someone adjusting you, right? And so it's just a tool that you can utilize in your day-to-day, right? In your practice, so that you can constantly question if it's your feelings or if it's the measure. And the measure doesn't lie. The measure is what gives you the magic, right? Because the measure is the magic of the universe. Everything is in geometrical proportion on this universe. It is all a big mathematical equation. And so when you can use the practice to play with that in your body, you will start to see big shifts, not just in how your body is in time and space, because the moment your body shifts, your whole reality will shift. So I hope this was a helpful concept for you to use, right? Because everything's only a concept until you use it. The moment you use the tool, you can get the magic out of the tool. But if you're just thinking, that's nice, right? Nothing's going to come from it. But if you can put down the grid, if you can see it in your mind, if you can start to set your poses up in a way that is archetypally aligned, you will change the way the musculature is in your body. The bones will start to shift, the mind will start to change, and you'll break free of a lot of patterns that are held in your body. And that's what the practice is for. It's to break apart the overly rigid patterns that are holding us back from the potential that we are here for at every single moment, because every single moment is opening into infinite potential, right? And if we're stuck in our habits and our patterns, then we're not opening to the potential of all that there is. We're just staying in our patterns and our habits. So I hope you enjoyed that concept. I hope you put it to use in your poses. And if you need yoga practices to use alongside it, then definitely my yoga book is great to use. My app has tons of courses. You can get yoga videos. You can join my membership where we're doing a lot of yoga. It's really about learning to reorient yourself in time and space. So you have a different experience, one that is more aligned with who you truly are and what your soul came here to do. And that's what the practice is for. It's not just physical, right? It's for the whole dimension of your being, every part of you.